Most races in Elder Scrolls were created by gods, born from divine magic, or shaped by some cosmic event that sounds appropriately epic. But the Argonians? They were designed by trees. Sentient, ancient, possibly omniscient trees that control everything from how Argonians reproduce to what gender they end up being. Today I'm breaking down every race in the Elder Scrolls and everything that makes them unique, starting with the one nobody takes seriously enough. Argonians. Everyone treats Argonians like they're the primitive swamp people of Tamriel, the ones you pick when you want water breathing and don't care about anything else. But here's the thing, Argonians might have the most sophisticated biology of any race on the continent, and it's not even close. It all starts with the Hist. The Hist are ancient sentient trees that exist almost exclusively in Black Marsh, and they don't just live alongside Argonians, they literally control them. Argonian eggs cannot hatch unless they're placed near a Hist tree. The Hist produce a specialized sap that determines an Argonian's gender, influences their personality, and essentially programs what kind of individual they're going to become. So every Argonian walking around Tamriel is a product designed by a tree, which is, not ideal for the whole free will thing, but it gets weirder. The Hist actively orchestrate breeding by identifying the strongest individuals and pairing them together. It's like an arranged marriage, except the matchmaker is a 10,000-year-old plant and nobody's allowed to say no. And if conditions get bad enough, Argonian females can biologically switch from egg-laying to live birth. No other race in Tamriel can do that. Zero. The Hist basically built a backup system into their own creations. Now, the part nobody talks about. At some point, a mysterious plague swept through Black Marsh that killed virtually every non-reptilian inhabitant, every Imperial soldier, every colonist, every outsider. Dead. The Argonians were completely unharmed. The plague's origins remain unknown, but the result was absolute. Black Marsh became unconquerable overnight. Cool. Add that to the list. The Dunmer didn't get that memo. For centuries, Dark Elf forces conducted slave raids into Black Marsh, capturing entire Argonian tribes. And then there's the Shadowborn. Argonians born under the sign of the Shadow are taken at birth and handed directly to the Dark Brotherhood. Some Argonians are literally born into assassination, not recruited, born into it. Between the Hist designing their biology, a plague that conveniently killed every outsider, and a homeland so hostile armies refused to enter it, the Argonians aren't primitive. They're the most biologically engineered race on the continent. Everyone just assumes they're simple because they live in a swamp. That's exactly what the trees want you to think. But if you think sentient trees controlling an entire species is strange, wait until you hear what the moons do to the Khajiit. Khajiit. Two Khajiit parents can have a baby that looks like a house cat. The same two parents, different night, can produce something the size of a war elephant, and nobody gets to choose. The entire thing is determined by the phases of Tamriel's two moons, Masser and Secunda, at the exact moment of birth. That's it. That's the system. These different body types are called Furstocks, and the range is genuinely absurd. On one end, you've got the Alfiq, which are fully sapient, intelligent Khajiit, who happen to look exactly like house cats. They can cast spells. They can hold conversations. They just also happen to fit in your lap. On the other end, you've got the Sensurat, massive creatures large enough to ride into battle. Both are Khajiit. Both could be siblings. The moon just decided one of them gets thumbs and the other one doesn't, which is, not ideal. But here's where it gets really interesting. The entire Khajiit civilization runs on a single crop, moon sugar. This stuff grows almost exclusively in Elsewhere, their homeland, and every attempt to cultivate it anywhere else on the continent has failed. Nobody fully understands why. The soil's wrong, the magic's wrong, something is fundamentally incompatible. This means the Khajiit control a natural monopoly on the most addictive substance in Tamriel, because moon sugar isn't just a sacred culinary ingredient used in traditional Khajiit cooking. It's also the base material for skooma. The skooma trade has been running continuously since at least the Second Era. Humans are especially susceptible to its addictive properties compared to other races, which creates enormous external demand that Khajiit traders are more than happy to supply. Governance in Elsewhere revolves around clan mothers, who wield political power primarily through their control of moon sugar harvests. You control the sugar, you control the province. Simple as that. Above the clan mothers sits the Main, a singular spiritual leader who rules the entire Khajiit race. Tradition holds that only one Mene can exist at any given time, representing a single eternal soul that's reborn across generations. One soul, one leader, forever. The Mene's job is to unify the notoriously fractious Khajiit clans, though success on that front tends to be temporary at best. And despite all of this, the cultural richness, the biological complexity, the fact that they literally control the continent's drug supply, Khajiit face systematic discrimination everywhere they go. The stereotype is that all Khajiit are thieves. Here's the thing. When you refuse to hire Khajiit Khajiit for legitimate work because you assume they're criminals, they turn to crime because they have zero other options, which then reinforces the exact stereotype you use to deny them employment in the first place. It's a textbook cycle of circular prejudice, and it's been spinning for centuries. But if the Khajiit have it rough, wait until you hear about a race whose entire existence is literally defined by a divine curse. Orcs, yes. According to the Dunmer, the entire Orcish race exists because a god got eaten and excreted. That's the story. Boethia, one of the Daedric princes, supposedly consumed the god Trinamac whole, spoke to the Chimer people using Trinamac's own mouth, and then, when finished, expelled what remained of him. The waste product became Malakath, and his followers became the Orcs, the entire race, born from divine excrement. Now, the Orcs tell it differently. In their version, Trinamac was fighting Boethia honorably when a second Daedric prince, Mephala, stabbed him in the back. A betrayal, not a bowel movement. Trinamac was cursed, his followers were cursed, and that's how the Orsimir came to be. Tragic, but dignified. Here's where it gets genuinely funny. A disguised Malakath, the god himself, once heard the Dunmer version of his own origin story, and dismissed it as too literal-minded. So even the deity at the center of this theological debate thinks one side is reading too much into the metaphor, which is, not ideal when the metaphor involves you being someone's waste product. But regardless of which creation myth you believe, the result is the same. The Orcs became something completely unlike every other elven race. They're technically Mer, descended from the same ancient elven lineage as the Altmer and Dunmer. But they traded magical affinity for raw physical dominance, developing into the most imposing warrior culture among any elven-descended race. Zero interest in arcane scholarship. Total commitment to hitting things harder than things hit them. And their society reflects that. Orcish strongholds operate under a system so rigid it makes imperial bureaucracy look relaxed. Only the chief is permitted to have children. One man fathers every single child in the community. He maintains multiple wives, and each wife has a designated economic role. The forge wife manages all smithing operations. The hunt wife supervises hunting and the sale of pelts and meat. Daughters are married off to chiefs of other strongholds as political connectors. Sons assist their mothers in their assigned trades until they're old enough to challenge a chief of their own. And if you leave, you're done. Community members who abandon their stronghold face ostracism upon return. You walked away from your tribal obligations, and the tribe remembers. In combat, Orcs possess Berserk Rage, a racial ability that doubles their damage output while cutting incoming damage in half. It's one of the most straightforwardly devastating racial powers in the game. No subtlety, no finesse, just pure mathematical violence. They also claim to have inhabited Skyrim before the Nords even showed up, which, if true, means the Nords built their entire civilization on land the Orcs considered theirs first. So you've got a race born from a cursed god, organized into authoritarian strongholds with mandatory breeding hierarchies, capable of entering berserker states that make them nearly unkillable, and they might be the original residents of Skyrim. They're elves who got cursed into becoming something arguably more interesting than elves ever were, but if the Orcs built their identity around never being conquered, wait until you hear about the Red Guards, a race that turned "don't tell us what to do" into an entire civilization. Red Guards. Most races in Elder Scrolls have a homeland. The Red Guards had one too. Then their own people blew it up. The Red Guards originally come from Yakuta, a continent west of Tamriel that no longer exists because around 1 Money 792 it sank beneath the ocean, and not because of some natural disaster or divine punishment. A group of magical warriors called the Hiradirje Ansei, sword singers who could manifest blades from pure willpower, deliberately sank their own continent as an act of revenge after suffering a military defeat. They lost a war, so they destroyed the entire landmass. Every man, woman, child, and goat living on Yokuta just woke up one morning to find out that some sore losers decided the whole continent needed to go, which is not ideal. The survivors fled east in a massive military migration so aggressive it earned its own name, Ra-Gada, meaning warrior wave, which eventually got corrupted into Redguard. They didn't politely ask Hammerfell if they could move in. They swept through the province and took it by force, conquering everything in their path. Refugees with the energy of a full-scale invasion. Here's the thing about Redguards that separates them from every other race on this list. Their entire culture is built around martial tradition. Yokudan society prizes combat skill above almost everything else, and the result is a population recognized across Tamriel as some of the most naturally gifted warriors on the continent. Not the Nords, not the Orcs, the Red Guards. Their sword-singing tradition alone puts them in a class of their own, a martial art so refined it literally lets masters conjure blades out of sheer willpower. That's not magic in the traditional sense. That's just being so good with a sword that reality gives up and hands you one, and their craftsmanship backs it up. Red Guard's smithing traditions produce curved swords and weaponry so distinctive that other races constantly comment on them. Their metalwork is considered among the finest in Tamriel, a reputation maintained for thousands of years across 2 continents. But here's where it gets really impressive. The Red Guards have never stayed conquered for long. Tiber Septim, the man who united all of Tamriel under one empire, did manage to bring Hammerfell under imperial control, but it took the Numidium, a giant reality-breaking brass god robot, to do it. And even then, the Red Guards never stopped being difficult about it. When the Empire signed the White Gold Concordat in 4E 175, essentially handing over chunks of southern Hammerfell to the Aldmeri Dominion, the Red Guards looked at that treaty and said, no, not we'll negotiate, not we respectfully disagree. They rejected the treaty entirely, split from the Empire, and became a fully sovereign independent nation. They told the Empire to get lost. They told the Aldmeri Dominion to get lost. And then they fought the Dominion alone for 5 more years until the Elves agreed to a second treaty and withdrew. A race of refugees from a sunken continent, forging legendary weapons, conjuring swords from willpower, and telling the 2 most powerful factions on the planet to go home. But if you think the Red Guards are impressive warriors, wait until you meet the race that built an entire empire on nothing but shouting and stubbornness. Nords. Nord culture is built on one thing above everything else. Breath. Not swords, not mead, not yelling at people in Whiterun. Breath. The goddess Kine breathed on the throat of the world and literally generated the races of men from the remaining wandering Aelnofae at the end of the Dawn era. Humanity exists because a goddess exhaled, and the Nords never forgot it. That's why the Thu'um matters so much to them. The Storm Voice isn't just magic. It's a direct connection to the act that created their entire species. Most Nords can speak, obviously, but a rare few can weaponize their voice into something called the Thu'um. These individuals are known as tongues, and the range of what they can do is genuinely absurd. At the lower end, a tongue can instill bravery in allies mid-battle just by shouting. Fine, standard fantasy stuff, but then it scales. A stronger practitioner can halt a charging enemy with a single roar, not slow them down, stop them. Stronger still, and you can call to a specific individual over hundreds of miles away, like the world's most aggressive long-distance phone call. And at the extreme end, a tongue can shout themselves to wherever their voice lands. They literally teleport by yelling. I don't know what to tell you, but here's where it gets truly unsettling. The most powerful Thu'um practitioners in Nord history cannot speak at all. Not because they lost the ability, because their voice became so catastrophically destructive that a single whispered word could level a building. These warriors must remain permanently gagged, communicating only through sign language and carved runes. Imagine being so powerful that silence is the only safe option. That's not a gift. That's a prison sentence you wear on your face. And the Nords didn't just sit around shouting at mountains. King Vrage the Gifted launched the Skyrim conquests in 1i240, building the first empire of the Nords, which lasted 176 years and at its height controlled Morrowind, much of High Rock, and northern Cyrodiil. Not through diplomacy or trade, like the Imperials would later attempt, but through sheer force and the cultural conviction that Skyrim's borders were suggestions at best. Every single Nord also carries a natural 50% frost resistance. The saying goes that the further north you travel into Skyrim, the more elemental the people become. Those in the far north reportedly carry wind itself within them and need almost no shelter. They're not just resistant to the cold, they're becoming part of it. By the 4th era, Nord identity crystallized around the Stormcloak Rebellion. Ulfric Stormcloak's uprising wasn't just about independence from the Empire. It was resistance to the Aldmeri Dominion's ban on Talos worship, a decree that struck at the heart of everything Nords believe about voice, breath, and divine right. To a culture that traces its existence back to a goddess breathing life into the world, being told you can't worship a god who ascended through the power of his own voice isn't a political inconvenience. It's an existential insult. But if the Nords have spent their history fighting for their identity, the Dunmer had theirs ripped away entirely, and the story of how it happened is one of the ugliest betrayals in Elder Scrolls lore. Dunmer. The Dunmer didn't start as the Dunmer. They started as the Chimer, golden-skinned elves who looked nothing like the ash-gray dark elves you know from Skyrim. The Chimer built one of the most deeply religious civilizations in all of Tamriel, worshipping 3 Daedric princes. And they were thriving. Beautiful golden skin, powerful culture, a homeland in Morrowind that was entirely their own. And then they ruined everything in a single afternoon. During the Battle of Red Mountain, the Dwemer activated the heart of Lorkhan in a desperate play for power. The result? Every single Dwemer vanished from existence. Gone. An entire civilization, wiped from Nirn in an instant. But that's not even the main event. See, the Tribunal, 3 Chimer leaders named Almalexia, Vivec, and Sotha Sil, saw an opportunity. The heart of Lorkhan was just sitting there, unguarded, radiating divine energy. Their friend and hero Indoril Nerevar stood in the way, insisting the heart shouldn't be used. So they murdered him, their closest ally, the guy who led them through the war, and they killed him to steal Kagranak's tools and bind themselves to the heart. They became living gods, which is, not ideal when you had to commit murder to get there. Azura was not amused. The Daedric prince cursed the entire Chimer race on the spot. Every single golden-skinned elf woke up with ash-gray skin and blood-red eyes, permanently. Not just the 3 who did the betraying, but every man, woman, and child. The Chimer were gone. The Dunmer were born. From there, Dunmer civilization organized itself through 5 great houses that functioned as political factions, economic powerhouses, and cultural institutions all rolled into one. And during those centuries, the Dunmer developed a habit that would come back to haunt them in spectacular fashion. They enslaved the Argonians, systematically. For generations, Dunmer raiding parties pushed into Black Marsh, capturing entire tribes, and dragging them back to Morrowind as forced labor. If you remember the Argonians from earlier in this video, file that away. Then came the Red Year. In 4E5, a massive rock called Bar Dao, which had been suspended above Vivec City by Vivec's divine power for centuries, finally crashed down after the Tribunal lost their godhood. The impact triggered Red Mountain's eruption. Vast portions of Vardenfell were buried under lava. Vivec City was obliterated. Mournhold was reduced to ruins. Cities that had stood for thousands of years were gone in days. And while the Dunmer were dealing with the worst natural disaster in their history, the Argonians saw their chance. Centuries of slavery, centuries of raids, centuries of stolen lives. And now, the slavers were on their knees. The Argonians invaded Morrowind with everything they had. The Dunmer, already broken by the eruption, couldn't stop them. Their homeland was simultaneously burning from the inside and being conquered from the outside. Golden elves cursed into ash. An entire civilization brought to its knees by a volcano and the very people they'd enslaved. If that's not karma operating on a continental scale, I don't know what is. But if the Dunmer story is about a civilization destroying itself from within, the next race is about a civilization that figured out how to hold everyone else together. Imperials? Most races earn their place in Tamriel's history through magic or brute strength, or some combination of both. The Imperials did it with paperwork, and honestly, that might be more terrifying than any Thu'um or Daedric curse. Natives of Cyrodiil, the Imperials are characteristically well-educated, wealthy, and well-spoken. They're not the strongest fighters. They're not the most gifted mages. What they are is organized. Imperials built their dominance on diplomacy, commerce, legal systems, and military strategy so disciplined it makes every other civilization look like they were winging it. And in a continent full of races that can shout you off a mountain or summon fire from their fingertips, the fact that bureaucracy won is genuinely hilarious. But let me explain how they got there. The Imperials didn't always run things. For most of the First Era, they were slaves under the Ayleids, the Heartland High Elves who treated humans like livestock. It took a woman named Alessia to lead a full-scale slave revolt, overthrow the Ayleids, and establish the first human empire in Cyrodiil. But the Imperials were just getting started. The Alessian order that followed became so fanatically devoted to purging elven influence that they merged divine authority with political power so completely that disobeying the government was literally a sin against the gods. That era eventually collapsed under its own weight, but the imperial instinct for building systems of control, that never went away. Then came Tiber Septim. During the Second Era's interregnum, when Cyrodiil had fractured into competing warlords and petty kingdoms, Septim unified Cyrodiil, conquered all of Tamriel, founded the Septim dynasty, and established the Third Empire, the most stable imperial structure in Tamrielic history. The First Nordic Empire lasted about 176 years. Tiber Septim's creation outlasted it by centuries. The Nords built an empire through raw aggression. The Imperials built one that actually stuck. Hi, welcome to Cyrodiil. We own everything. How? Meetings, mostly. But even the greatest administrative machine in history has its breaking point. The Great War from 4E 171 to 4E 175 pitted led the Aldmeri Dominion against the Empire, and the result was devastating. The war ended with the White Gold Concordat, a treaty so humiliating it makes you wonder if the Imperials even had negotiators in the room. The Empire was forced to ban the worship of Talos entirely, the god who was literally Tiber Septim. They agreed to ban worship of the guy who built the thing they were trying to save, which is, not ideal. By 4E201, the Empire is a shadow of what it was. Provinces are peeling off. The Stormcloaks are tearing Skyrim apart. The Thalmor are walking through Imperial territory like they own the place, hunting down Talos worshippers with impunity. And yet, Imperial administrative structures keep functioning across the remaining territories. The machine is broken, but it's still running, because that's what Imperials do. They don't fight the hardest or cast the biggest spells, they build systems, and systems are a lot harder to kill than soldiers. Whether those systems can survive what's coming next is another question entirely. Because the elves who forced that treaty, they're not done. Altmer. Every single conflict you've heard about today traces back to these guys. The Nords are rebelling because of them. The Imperials signed a humiliating treaty because of them. The Red Guards literally seceded from the Empire because of them. The Altmer, the High Elves of the Somerset Isles, are the tallest elven race, the most magically gifted civilization on the continent, and the single greatest threat to every human nation in Tamriel. And they know it. Here's the thing about the Altmer. They don't just have a natural talent for magic. They are built for it on a biological level. Every Altmer is born with 50 extra magicka compared to any other race, and their highborn ability lets them regenerate magicka at an absurd rate for 60 seconds. While a Nord is swinging an axe and hoping for the best, an Altmer is casting spells that would take other mages years to even attempt. They're not just good at magic, they're the best, and it's not particularly close. But raw magical power isn't what makes the Altmer dangerous. It's the ideology. Altmer society is rigidly hierarchical. Magical knowledge is hoarded among elite institutions, passed down through bloodlines designed to keep power concentrated at the top. The Altmer don't want diversity. They want purity. They want control. And in 4E29, they got organized. Radical Altmer supremacists consolidated power in the Somerset Isles and formed the Third Aldmeri Dominion, governed by a political body called the Thalmor. The Thalmor's philosophy is simple. Mer are superior to men, and the Merethic era, that ancient period when elven civilizations ruled Tamriel and humanity was subordinate, needs to come back. Not coexistence, not diplomacy, the complete dismantling of human rule and the resurrection of elven dominance over the entire continent. The Thalmor's first major power play was claiming credit for ending the Oblivion Crisis. Whether they actually ended it is debatable, but it doesn't matter. They told everyone they did, and they used that claim as the foundation for their political legitimacy. It's a masterclass in propaganda, and it worked. Then came the Great War. The Aldmeri Dominion went to war with the Empire, and by the time it was over, the Empire signed the White Gold Concordat, a treaty so humiliating it banned the worship of Talos across all Imperial provinces. After that, Thalmor agents moved freely through entire provinces, hunting down Talos worshippers, eliminating the remnants of the Blades, and generally acting like they owned the place, which, functionally, they did. This is why the Nords are furious. This is why Ulfric launched a rebellion. This is why the Red Guards fought the Dominion alone. Every major political crisis in the Fourth Era has the Thalmor's fingerprints on it, and the scariest part? They're not done. The Thalmor don't want to just influence the Empire. They want to erase thousands of years of human civilization and return to an era where elves controlled everything and humans were nothing. That's not a political goal. That's an existential threat to every man, woman, and child on the continent. Every race we've talked about today has strengths, weaknesses, and complicated histories. But the Altmer are the only ones actively trying to rewrite the entire order of civilization. They have the magic, the organization, and the fanaticism to actually try it. And based on everything we've seen so far, nobody has figured out how to stop them. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.